April 9, 1942, Bataan Peninsula, Philippines. The humid jungle air hung thick with the stench of gunpowder and decay as the first rays of dawn pierced the canopy like accusatory fingers. Sergeant Lester Tenney, 22-year-old tank commander from Chicago, Illinois, crouched behind the rusted hull of his M3 Stuart light tank, its engine long silenced by fuel shortages. His hands, blistered and blackened from weeks of relentless fighting, gripped a .45 pistol that felt heavier than ever. Around him, the remnants of the 192nd Tank Battalion, gaunt, malaria-riddled men in tattered uniforms, whispered in hushed tones. The Japanese artillery thundered in the distance, a relentless drumbeat echoing the pounding of their hearts. No one spoke of retreat. There was nowhere left to go. The American and Filipino forces, starved and outgunned after months of siege, faced the unthinkable. Major General Edward P. King, Jr. had just radioed the surrender. Tenney's stomach twisted as the white flags rose hesitantly from foxholes, fluttering like ghosts in the morning breeze. You can almost hear the collective breath held, the moment when hope shattered against reality. Japanese soldiers emerged from the tree line, bayonets fixed, their khaki uniforms crisp against the muddied chaos. They moved with mechanical precision, shouting orders in sharp, guttural Japanese that needed no translation. Hands up, weapons down. Tenney dropped his pistol, the clatter swallowed by the jungle floor. His crewmates followed, their faces a mask of defiance and defeat. As the enemy closed in, prodding with rifle butts, Tenney caught the eye of Private First Class Ben Morin, his driver, a kid from Wisconsin who'd joked about steaks back home just hours ago. Now Morin's eyes were wide with unspoken terror. The captors wasted no time. They stripped the prisoners of watches, rings, anything that gleamed. Tenney felt rough hands yank his dog tags, the chain snapping against his neck. "Baka," one guard snarled, shoving him into line. "Fools." The word hung in the air like a curse. Thousands of men, Americans, Filipinos, were herded like cattle onto the dusty Mariveles Road, the starting point of what no one yet knew would become infamous. The sun climbed higher, turning the peninsula into a furnace. Thirst clawed at throats already parched from rationed water. Tenney's lips cracked as he marched, his boots sinking into the soft earth churned by endless feet. Whispers rippled through the column. "They'll treat us fair, Geneva Convention, right?" But doubt crept in like the dysentery that had already claimed so many. A Filipino soldier collapsed ahead, gasping. A Japanese guard barked an order, and when the man didn't rise fast enough, a bayonet flashed. The scream cut short. Blood soaked the road. Tenney averted his eyes, but the image burned in, the first horror, raw and irreversible. Hours blurred into agony. The march stretched on, 5 miles, 10, under the merciless tropical sun. Guards on bicycles zipped by, laughing as they swung bamboo sticks at stragglers. Tenney's legs burned. His pack, a meager bundle of canned rations and a canteen, felt like lead. He thought of home, the windy streets of Chicago, his mother's apple pie. Anything to drown the growing dread. Beside him, Lieutenant Bill Abendroth muttered prayers, his voice hoarse. "Hold on, boys, just hold on." But the guard's cruelty escalated. A prisoner begged for water from a roadside stream, denied. When he knelt anyway, a rifle butt cracked his skull. Tenney flinched at the sound, like a melon splitting. Bodies began to line the path, executed for falling out or simply left to die. The air reeked of sweat, blood, and fear. Flies swarmed, a black cloud feasting on the fallen. You can imagine the buzz, incessant, a soundtrack to despair. By nightfall, the column reached Arani,
a ghost town of bombed-out huts. Exhausted men collapsed in the dirt, but rest was fleeting. Guards roused them with kicks before dawn, the march resuming. Tenney's feet blistered, each step a fire. He shared a sip from his canteen with Morin, the water warm and metallic. "We'll make it," he whispered. But as the sun rose again, revealing more bodies twisted in unnatural poses, doubt gnawed deeper. Whispers of worse to come filtered back. "They're marching us to hell." Tenney pushed the thought away, focusing on the rhythm of his boots, one foot, then the other. Survival boiled down to that. But as the road curved north toward San Fernando, a new terror loomed, rumors of trains, camps, and an enemy unbound by mercy. What awaited at the end of this death march? The question hung unanswered, pulling them forward into the unknown.
April 12, 1942, somewhere north of Lubao, Philippines. The column snaked along the dusty national road like a dying serpent, stretching for miles under a sun that felt like a blowtorch pressed against bare skin. Sergeant Lester Tenney's boots, now shredded rags wrapped around bloodied feet, left crimson prints in the dirt with every agonizing step. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood, the sour reek of unwashed bodies, and something worse, the sweet rot stench of death that clung to everything. Around him, the men of the 192nd Tank Battalion shuffled in ragged formation, guarded by Japanese soldiers who rode bicycles alongside, rifles slung casually, faces impassive behind round spectacles. No mercy here. A prisoner stumbled out of line to scoop water from a muddy puddle. Artesian wells dotted the road, tantalizingly close. "Mizu! Water!" he croaked. A guard dismounted swiftly, sword flashing in the sunlight. One clean stroke. The man's head rolled into the ditch, body crumpling like a sack. The column didn't stop. Couldn't stop. You can feel the collective flinch, the way eyes darted away, hearts pounding faster. Tenney gripped Private Morin's arm, steadying him as another wave of malaria chills racked the younger man's frame. "Keep moving, Ben. Eyes forward." But forward meant more horrors. Bodies lined the route now, hundreds, maybe thousands. Filipino scouts mostly, but Americans too. Some bayoneted for falling behind, others shot for no reason at all. Flies swarmed in black clouds, feasting on open wounds and lifeless eyes staring at the merciless sky. The guards called it the Death March in their own tongue, though the prisoners wouldn't learn the name until later. Beatings were constant, rifle butts to the kidneys if you slowed, bamboo poles across the back for looking at a guard wrong. One officer, a lieutenant from the Provisional Tank Group, protested when a guard stole his wedding ring. The response was immediate: dragged to the roadside, forced to dig a shallow grave with his hands, then buried alive as the column marched past. Tenney heard the muffled screams fading behind him, a sound that would haunt nightmares for decades. First was the real killer, lips split and bleeding, tongues swollen. Guards denied water even when they passed carabao wallows or streams. "No drink! March!" Yet they'd stopped the column arbitrarily, forcing men to sit in the blistering sun for hours, no shade, no movement, while Japanese trucks rumbled by, kicking up dust that coated parched throats. By the 5th day, Tenney's world narrowed to survival. He traded his watch for a handful of rice from a sympathetic Filipino villager who risked death to toss food over the barbed wire detours. Others weren't so lucky. Sunstroke claimed men in droves. They'd collapse foaming at the mouth, only to be finished off or left for the vultures. San Fernando finally loomed, a railhead where the marchers were crammed into suffocating boxcars, 100 men to a car designed for 40. Doors slammed shut, no air, no sanitation. The heat inside turned infernal. Men died standing up, pressed against the living. When the doors opened at Capas, the dead tumbled out like cordwood. From there, the final 10-mile trudge to Camp O'Donnell. Tenney staggered through the gates on April 15th, one of the lucky ones, alive, barely.
But as he collapsed in the filth of the barracks, gazing at the emaciated ghosts already there, a chilling realization sank in. The march was only the beginning. What fresh hell awaited inside these barbed wire walls?
April 16, 1942. Camp O'Donnell, Capas, Tarlac Province, Philippines. The barbed wire gates clanged shut behind Sergeant Lester Tenney like the jaws of a trap, sealing him into a sprawling compound of misery that stretched across dusty barracks and open pits under a relentless sun. The air hit first, thick, choking, a foul cocktail of human waste, rotting flesh and despair that coated your throat like tar. Tenney staggered forward, his blistered feet leaving bloody smears on the parched ground, surrounded by thousands of skeletal figures who could barely be called men anymore. Camp O'Donnell wasn't a prison, it was a death factory. Built for 10,000, it now crammed in over 60,000 Filipinos and 9,000 Americans, bodies packed so tight in the Nipa Palm barracks that there was barely room to lie down. The thatched roofs leaked during rare rains, but offered no shade from the heat that turned the place into an oven by noon. Latrines? Shallow trenches overflowing with dysentery-ridden filth, swarming with maggots and flies that carried death on their wings. You can picture the buzz, constant, as insects feasted on the living and the dead alike. Water was the cruelest torment. One spigot for thousands, 2 cups per man per day, murky and warm, rationed by Japanese guards who lounged in the shade with full canteens. Men fought over drops, collapsing from dehydration in lines that snaked for hours. Dysentery and beriberi raged unchecked. Bellies swelled grotesquely from wet beriberi, legs turned to jelly. Malaria chills shook frames already wasted to bones. Tenney watched Private Morin waste away overnight, his once robust body reduced to skin stretched over ribs, eyes sunken in hollow sockets. Food? A joke. A single lugao ball twice a day, rice boiled to mush, often maggot-infested, no bigger than a fist. Men lost 50, 60 pounds in weeks. Emaciation set in fast. Prisoners became walking skeletons, joints protruding, skin yellowed from jaundice. The zero ward, the hospital, was no sanctuary, just a bamboo shed where the dying were dumped to expire without medicine or care. Doctors like Captain Herbert Ott worked miracles with nothing, but death claimed 200, 300 Americans daily in those first months, Filipinos 10 times that. Japanese guards enforced brutality with casual sadism, beatings for the slightest infraction, bowing too slow, stealing a banana from the commandant's garden. The sun treatment, forced to sit motionless in the blazing noon heat for hours until men passed out or died. Tenney endured it once, the sun scorching his scalp, vision blurring as sweat evaporated before it could fall. Bakayaro, guards screamed, idiots, fools, rifle butts cracking skulls for emphasis. Yet, amid the horror, flickers of humanity. Prisoners shared scraps, whispered encouragement. Tenney formed bonds with fellow tankers, trading stories of home to stave off madness. He buried friends daily in shallow graves, marking them with dog tags on sticks. The burial details, hauling bloated corpses to pits, became numb routine. But each body was a reminder, survival was defiance. By June, as deaths peaked and the camp's horrors became unsustainable even for the Japanese, rumors swirled of transfers. Cabanatuan, Hellships to Japan. Worse places? Tenney clung to life, his weight down to 100 pounds on a 6-foot frame, wondering if the nightmare would ever shift or simply claim him next. July 1942. The gates of Camp O'Donnell swung open one sweltering morning, and Sergeant Lester Tenney, now a gaunt shadow of the tank commander who'd arrived months earlier, shuffled into a column of the fittest survivors. Selected for transfer, not as punishment this time, but because the Japanese finally admitted O'Donnell had become unsustainable, even for them. Death rates had shocked their own commanders. Tenney weighed barely 120 pounds, his uniform hanging like rags on a scarecrow, berry swollen feet crammed into split boots. The march to Bataan, another 20 miles, was brutal but mercifully shorter than Bataan. Guards still beat stragglers, but the column moved with purpose. Rumors spread. Bataan had farms, better water, maybe even Red Cross parcels. Hope, fragile as it was, flickered in hollow eyes. Prison Camp No. 1 at Bataan sprawled across former Philippine Army land, barbed wire, watchtowers, barracks in rows. Over 8,000 Americans crammed in, but compared to O'Donnell's slaughterhouse, it felt almost civilized. A makeshift hospital run by prisoner doctors like Captain William Cummings, vegetable gardens scratched from the dirt, water from artesian wells, still rationed but cleaner. Food improved slightly, more rice, occasional kamote roots, even mongo beans. Deaths dropped from hundreds a day to dozens a week. Tenney found old comrades from the 192nd, Lieutenant Colonel William E. Brower, Captain Mark Wolfeld. They organized quietly, work details for extra food, secret radios smuggled in parts, even a hidden university where professors taught classes in whispers. Tenney volunteered for farm parties, tilling soil under guard, sneaking carrots or tomatoes to share. Small acts of resistance. Stealing a chicken became legend, boiled in a stolen helmet over a hidden fire. But cruelty lingered. The Blood Brother incident. 2 prisoners caught escaping, forced to beat each other to death with clubs while guards watched. Tenney heard the thuds and screams from across the compound, a reminder that mercy was rare. Dysentery, diphtheria, and pellagra still claimed lives. The hospital filled with men whose skin peeled from vitamin deficiency, whose gums bled black. Yet here, Tenney began to rebuild strength. He traded labor for cigarettes, cigarettes for food. Bonds deepened, men became family. Private Morin, who'd survived the march, grew stronger beside him. They talked of liberation, of MacArthur's promise, "I shall return." But as 1943 dragged into 1944, work details turned ominous. The Japanese needed slave labor for airfields, bridges, and whispers grew of Hellships, transports to Japan or Manchuria for factory work. Fit men were listed. Tenney's name appeared. In October 1944, guards barked orders, "Pack what little you have, you're shipping out." As Tenney lined up for the unknown voyage, fear coiled tight. Bataan had been hell, but survivable. What awaited on the open sea, in unmarked freighters crossing submarine-infested waters? October 1944. The docks at Manila, Philippines. The tropical night pressed down heavy and humid as Sergeant Lester Tenney and hundreds of fellow prisoners from Cabanatuan were herded aboard a rusted, unmarked Japanese freighter, the Oryoku Maru. No lights, no markings to identify it as carrying POWs. Just another cargo ship in the convoy, packed below decks with human cargo. Tenney descended the narrow ladder into the hold, the air already thick with the sweat and fear of men crammed shoulder to shoulder in suffocating darkness. Over 1,600 prisoners were forced into 3 holds designed for far fewer. No room to sit, let alone lie down. Bodies pressed so tight you could feel the heartbeat of the man behind you. The hatches slammed shut overhead, plunging them into pitch black. Heat built instantly, bodies generating a furnace in the sealed steel tomb. Air turned foul within hours. Vomit, urine, feces, the coppery tang of blood from dysentery sores. Men stripped naked to survive the stifling temperature, skin slick against skin. No food, no water for the first day. Buckets for sanitation overflowed immediately, sloshing across the deck with every roll of the ship. Dysentery ripped through the hold like wildfire. Men defecated where they stood, the filth running ankle deep. Screams echoed in the dark. Delirium from fever, pleas for air, the gurgling last breaths of those who succumbed standing up, held upright by the crush of bodies. On the second day, a single canteen of water per 50 men. Fights broke out in the gloom, fists, teeth, desperation.
Tenney clung to a beam overhead, trying to keep his head above the press, sharing sips with Morin when the bucket passed. "Stay with me, Ben," he gasped, voice lost in the cacophony of suffering. December 13. The ship anchored in Subic Bay. American planes, Hellcats, and Corsairs from Task Force 38 roared overhead. To the prisoners below, hope surged. Cheers erupted in the holds. Liberation? But the unmarked ship drew no mercy. Bombs and strafing runs tore into the Oryoku Maru. Explosions rocked the hull. Shrapnel ripped through decks. Men topside were machine-gunned as they tried to escape the burning ship. Below, panic. The holds became ovens as fires spread. Hatches remained bolted. Guards fired down into the darkness to keep order. Hundreds died in minutes, burned alive, suffocated by smoke, crushed in the stampede toward non-existent exits. Tenney felt the heat rising, the screams deafening. Water poured in from bomb holes, mixing with blood and filth. He fought toward a ladder as men clawed past, nails tearing flesh. Finally, a hatch opened. Guards ordered survivors topside, at gunpoint. Tenney emerged into blinding daylight, the deck a slaughterhouse of charred bodies and twisted metal. Only 1,300 made it off alive. They were marched naked to a flooded tennis court ashore, panned like animals under the sun. No shade, no water. Snipers picked off anyone who moved toward the nearby stream. Days later, the remnants, Tenney among them, were loaded onto another hell ship, then another. The nightmare repeated. Holds of death, bombings, starvation. But something hardened in him now. Survival wasn't just luck anymore. It was will. As the ship steamed north toward Japan through U-boat-infested waters, one question burned brighter than fear. How much more could a man endure before breaking?
January 1945. Omuta, Kyushu, Japan. Freezing wind whipped across the snow-dusted docks as Sergeant Lester Tenney and the ragged survivors of the Hellships were marched off the final transport, the Brazil Maru, after weeks of unimaginable suffering at sea. Over 500 men had perished on that last voyage alone, their bodies dumped unceremoniously into the Pacific. Tenney's legs barely held him as he stumbled ashore, emaciated to 90 pounds, skin stretched tight over bones, berry still swelling his ankles. The cold bit deeper than any Philippine heat ever had. They were herded straight to Fukuoka Camp No. 17, a slave labor outpost tied to the Mitsui coal mines. Barbed wire, guard towers, low wooden barracks that offered little shield from the biting winter. The camp commandant, a stern officer named Matsuhashi, addressed them through an interpreter. You work, you eat. No work, no eat. Simple, brutal. Tenney was assigned to the night shift in the Mike coal mine, one of Japan's deepest and most dangerous. Descending in creaking cages over 1,000 feet underground, the air grew thick with coal dust that coated lungs black. Temperatures soared in the narrow seams, men stripped to loincloths, swinging picks in dim lantern light. 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week. No safety gear. Cave-ins were common. Floods turned tunnels into death traps. Guards, civilian overseers called gunzoku, patrolled with pick handles and bamboo spears. Beatings were routine. Fall behind quota, a club across the back. Rest without permission, kicked until ribs cracked. Tenney learned quickly to hide weakness. He and fellow POWs, Americans, British, Australians, Dutch, worked alongside Korean forced laborers, all treated as disposable. Food remained starvation level, a thin soup of fish heads and millet, a small rice ball if quota was met. Men grew weaker daily. Electric feet from berry made every step agony. Pneumonia and tuberculosis spread in the damp barracks. The camp hospital offered no medicine, just a place to die quietly. Yet resistance simmered. Sabotage became art, loosening bolts on ore cars so they derailed,
accidentally breaking tools, working just slow enough to disrupt production without drawing fatal attention. Tenney joined secret networks smuggling news from hidden radios, whispers of Allied advances, island-hopping campaigns closing in on Japan. But the guards' cruelty peaked in sadistic games. One overseer forced prisoners to race carrying heavy coal sacks. If you lost, a beating. Another poured water on sleeping men in winter, letting it freeze. Tenney watched friends waste away, their bodies carted out like refuse each dawn. As spring 1945 brought rumors of American bombers overhead, B-29s darkening the sky, a new fear gripped the camp. Would the Japanese kill them all before liberation? Guards spoke openly of final disposition. Tenney lay awake nights, coal dust in his lungs, wondering if he'd survived Hellships and mines, only to die in the endgame. Then, in August, everything changed.
August 15th, 1945. Fukuoka Camp Number 17, Omuta, Japan. The morning shift in the Mike coal mine ended early, guards barking urgent orders, faces tense for the first time in months. Sergeant Lester Tenney emerged from the cage into blinding daylight, black dust caking his sweat-streaked body, expecting the usual beating for slow production. Instead, the Gunzoku overseers stood silent, rifles lowered. Something was wrong, or right. Rumors exploded through the barracks that afternoon. The hidden radio, smuggled parts reassembled in a stolen rice cooker, crackled with news no one dared believe at first. Emperor Hirohito's voice broadcast across Japan, surrender. The war was over. Men stared at each other in stunned silence, then erupted. Cheers, sobs, embraces among skeletons who had forgotten how to feel joy. But liberation didn't come instantly. Guards vanished overnight, fearing reprisals. Prisoners, too weak to chase them, raided the camp stores instead. Rice, canned fish, real food after years of starvation. Tenney ate slowly, his shrunken stomach rebelling, but the taste was freedom itself. On September 2, American B-29s roared low over the camp, not dropping bombs this time, but parachuting Red Cross parcels, chocolate, cigarettes, medicine. Tenney caught one, tearing it open with trembling hands. The chocolate melted on his tongue like a dream. OSS teams parachuted in days later, followed by U.S. Army liberators. Medics weighed the men, Tenney at 85 pounds, a ghost in dog tags. Evacuation came swiftly, trucks to ships, then hospital beds in the Philippines, and finally America. Tenney sailed home on a Liberty ship, standing on deck watching Japan fade, the coal dust finally washing from his skin. But the horrors clung deeper. Nightmares of the march, the holds, the mines. Friends lost. Morin had died in the Hellship, one more body consigned to the sea. Back in Chicago, parades and cheers greeted returning heroes. But Tenney struggled. Survivor's guilt gnawed. Why him and not the others? Flashbacks hit without warning, the crack of a rifle butt, the stench of the holds. Doctors called it battle fatigue. He buried it, married, built a life in business, raised a family. Yet the silence weighed heavy. For decades he rarely spoke of the camps. In the 1980s, something shifted. Japanese denials of atrocities, textbooks glossing over Bataan, the Hellships, stirred him to action. Tenney became a voice for the forgotten. He testified before Congress, fought for apologies and compensation. In 1995, he returned to Japan, not for vengeance, but reconciliation. Meeting former guards, mine overseers, even camp interpreters. Some wept, bowing deeply. We were wrong, one said. Tenney forgave not for them, but for himself. He spoke at schools, wrote books, ensured the story lived. I survived so I could tell it, he'd say. The Bataan Death March, the camps, the Hellships, tens of thousands perished, but their suffering forced the world to remember. Lester Tenney lived to 91, passing in 2017, one of the last voices of that generation. His message endured.
Hatred destroys, but humanity, even forged in hell, can heal. In the end, he turned unimaginable horror into a lifetime of light, proving that even from the darkest camps, a man can emerge unbroken.